All right, the kids can go over to okay. Thank you, baby. I love you.
I love you too, Daddy.
Is this okay? Oh, I don't need that. All right. Woo. See, the singing part I don't dread so much. I feel fairly comfortable with that, playing and singing. Even losing my voice, that's way more comfortable than what's coming. I'll tell you, wow. Well, if someone would be so kind as to run up into that room and get the other 2 pages of my outline. So here's the deal. A preacher I ain't. But it does bring me to a really good point. When I was called to be the music minister, we were in Florida. And I remember when Corey stepped down and I had several people call and tell me what was going on and ask me if I was going to take over, and I very adamantly said no. Turns out that wasn't my decision to make. But you're awesome. Is that? Now, see, y'all clap and laugh like that, but what y'all don't realize is, truthfully, without her, I wouldn't have even got up this morning, so... So I felt that call to take over the music ministry, and I had the audacity to tell God, well, Lord, if you want me to do it, I'm going to need a burning bush moment. And I don't mean like a feeling. I mean, I'm literally going to need to walk outside my house and see a burning bush. And so I said no for about 2 months. I put it off, and I said, I'm not doing it. I can't do it. And I was talking to Danny a couple weeks ago. And I will be honest with you, after taking over the music ministry, God has poured blessings on me and my family that I can't even explain to you. And all I did was cheated myself out of 2 months worth of those blessings. And so, you know, this has nothing to do with the message today. I was just rambling while she went and got my paper. But don't miss your blessing. If God's laid something on your heart, do it. You know, God laid something on Jonah's heart, and he didn't listen. He wound up smelling like fish. And he still wound up doing it in the end. So go ahead and just follow God. And that's what I'm trying to do. So if y'all will all bear with me, you know, why God picked me this Sunday is beyond me. But I have the utmost faith that he knows what he's doing. So we'll just roll on with that. So I told you the theme for today is praise you in this storm. Show of hands, how many people have been through something? Okay, if you can't raise your hand right now, God bless you, but yours is coming. So just wait on it. Go ahead, listen, prepare, and hopefully you'll know where to turn when that storm in your life hits. If we could pull up Acts 28, 8 and 9. If you have your Bibles with you, do that. We'll have it on the screen here as well. I'll give you just a second. Now, we're going to cheat today. See, in these storms and in these trials, God already knows the outcome. So we don't understand it. We're sitting in the middle of it. We look around and all we see are clouds. All we see is thunder and lightning. But God is omnipotent. He sees all of it. So we're going to skip ahead today. This is actually where our story ends. But so if you see on verse 8, as it happened, Publius' father was ill with fever and dysentery. Paul went in and prayed for him, and laying hands on him, he healed him. Then all the other sick people on the island came and were healed. Okay, so now we know where the story ends. Now we know what God has planned. Now we can see where Paul is heading. But let's way back up to chapter 21. And we're going to start with Paul there. Now, we all know the Damascus Road story. We've all heard this many times. We're going to skip past that today. But so in chapter 21, Paul is doing right. He's preaching. He's sharing the gospel. He's doing what he's supposed to do. And the Jewish believers didn't really appreciate it at all. And rumors were flying around that he's telling Gentiles and the Jewish that live among the Gentiles to disregard the law of Moses, that's not what they're following. Well, so Paul sends some fellow believers to the temple, and he tells them that he wants them to go through the sanctification ritual, and his hope was that they would learn, or that they would do that, and the other people would learn that they are following the law, that they are doing what they're supposed to do. So Paul comes into the temple a few days later, and it doesn't go quite how he planned. Here's a man trying to be obedient, trying to do the right thing, and a group of Jews from Asia started raising a mob and saying that, here's the man that denies the law of Moses. Here's the man who's corrupting our believers. And they begin to beat him and shouting, "Kill him." Well, the commander of the Roman army hears what's going on. He runs down. He tries to sort it out, and he can't figure anything out. So he orders him arrested and carried away to the fortress till he can sort it out. Now, it gets so violent that the guards actually have to carry Paul on their shoulders because the crowd is trying to murder him there on the spot. So Paul's off to a great start in this trip. It would be really easy at that point to look around and go, man, all I was trying to do was be obedient, Lord, and I got beat and arrested again. Well, so Paul goes back to the fortress, and he appears before the Jewish high council, and this goes wonderfully for Paul. He tries to talk. They're not going to hear anything that he has to say. But there was something really cool about it. There were people there. He was able to cause some confusion just because he gave his testimony. He starts speaking. He starts telling what he believes. And now all of a sudden, he's got this captive audience of people that are hearing his testimony. And they bicker amongst themselves. He's led back to a cell. A group of people plan to kill him, so he has to be moved. So he's sent to another man and to another man. He appears before Felix. He appears before Festus. He eventually appears before King Agrippa. King Agrippa listens to his case. Once again, Paul tells him, I pray that everyone in this room will be just like me without these chains. It's another opportunity for him to speak, even in chains. It's an opportunity for him to share God's word. He's got that captive audience. Well, Agrippa hears his plea and tells him, well, I'd release you. I find no fault with you. I think you're innocent. But you've already appealed to Caesar. So put your chains back on, get on a boat, and we're going to send you over there. Well, you ever said something and looked back and thought, boy, I wish I just had kept my mouth shut? God had a plan for this, but I have to think as Paul's sitting there, he's got to be thinking, wow, all I had to do was be quiet. But he didn't. And this is where the real heart of our message is. He's on the boat. He's going to appear before Caesar. And I skimmed over it, but now he's already had a vision from the Lord that told him he's going to be before Caesar. So now Paul has this faith. He already knows where he's going. He feels very led, very directed. They put him on the boat, and everything goes wrong from the very start. It's rough sailing. It's bad waters. They're having to go the long way around. Nothing on this trip is playing out right. And then the storm hits. And guys, we're not talking about a little wind, the storms we had last night, nothing compared. They're talking typhoon strength winds called northeasterns are hitting this ship. I mean, it's being blown around like a little John boat out on the ocean. I mean, there is no hope for this. The crew begins to reevaluate things. They're slinging cargo overboard. Because when you get in that situation, you start reevaluating what's valuable. See, when they left port, that cargo was very important. That was their livelihood. That's what they were hoping to make their money with. Well, when your boat looks like it's going to capsize, that doesn't seem all that important anymore. And all of a sudden, they're slinging it overboard. It has very little value. They go through this storm, and they're hammered day after day. Acts 27:20, if I can get that one. I think I skipped a verse. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and stars, until at last all hope was gone. Now, have you been in that point in your life where not even the stars are shining for you? I mean, there's nothing. All hope is gone. This crew is all but given up. They're just basically waiting for it to end. But Paul gets to speak to them. In 27:23 through 26, he says, "You guys don't worry, for last night an angel of God to whom I belong and serve stood beside me. And he said, 'Don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in all of his goodness has granted safety for everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God, it will be just as he said. But we will be shipwrecked on an island.'" So now he gives them this bit of hope. And it seems to work for a little bit. They have some hope. They feel better. But you ever get some good news? You kind of feel your spirits lifted. All right, this is going to be okay. And then nothing changes. For 14 more days, they are hammered in this storm. And I can't do it justice to explain how bad this storm is. So finally, the sailors, they think they're getting close to land. They've already forgotten Paul's warning. They're already disregarding that. And again, they're going to try to handle it by themselves. Their hope lies in them, not in God. So they start to lower the lifeboats. And Paul steps in and he warns them. He's like, "Guys, now, if y'all lower those lifeboats, you're dead. It's over. I've done told you. God will see us through this." So the crew believes him. They cut the lines to the lifeboats. Now, I can't help but thinking as a crewman on that ship, watching my own, you're in the ship, that lifeboat is your only hope for a way out. And you watch that line get cut, and you can just see that lifeboat trailing off in the distance. And if you had the slightest little bit of hope left, it just got taken away from you. But it had to happen. It had to happen. It was God's plan. So now they have no way out. I mean, they are completely without a way to turn. They're just waiting on this boat to wreck and hoping that what Paul told them is true. And I love this next part, because then Paul sits back and says, "Guys, y'all haven't eaten anything." Pull up 27, 35, and 36. Thank you. So then he took some bread, gave thanks to God before them all, and broke off a piece and ate it. Then everyone was encouraged and began to eat. Now here's this crew of 276 people sitting watching this one loony guy in the middle of this storm. We're all waiting to die. This ship's going down. He breaks bread, blesses it, thanks God for it, and starts handing it out. I can't get my mind around that. The faithfulness, the strength in your belief that it would take to be waiting to die, it appears. And he can just thank God and roll with it. And I pray someday I have the strength of Paul. But again, he had a captive audience. See, I love that. Pull up that last verse, 36, please. Then everyone was encouraged. Not 50 of the crew, not 70 of the crew. There were 276 people And it says everyone was encouraged. See, Paul had a captive audience. Through his struggles, through his trials, he was able to share the Lord. And these people were going to get to see that. We go on, the ship does wreck, runs up on a shoal, starts getting smashed to pieces. The bow strikes, the waves are tearing the stern apart. The boat's done. But there's an island, just like they were told. They swim to the island, and it's cold, it's rainy. They meet friendly islanders. They're on the island of Malta at this point. And the islanders gather together, and they start building a fire. Paul, not wanting to sit around like a lump on a log, decides, I'll help. He starts gathering sticks. He goes to put the sticks in the fire, and a poisonous viper jumps out and latches to his hand. Now, it doesn't say, we're not talking a quick snake bite. It said it latches on. All the people around see this. Now at this point, Paul's got to be thinking, really? I've been beaten, but I was okay. I was told I could be released. But I opened my mouth and had to get on the ship. I go through the storm, the shipwrecks. We wash up on an island. We're cold, we're miserable. They're going to build a fire. And now I've got a snake hanging from my hand. And this is the point in my Bible study where I realized Paul had to be kin to me. However many times down the line, that man's my great-great-granddaddy. He's got to be. I've been taught my whole life if it weren't for bad luck, Bryant's wouldn't have any at all. And so I'm fairly convinced somehow or another we're kin. But the great thing about this, now here's this deadly snake hanging on to Paul. He looks down at it. He casts it into the fire. All the people around are waiting for him to well up and die. Ain't that like people? Don't we see something bad happen, everybody steps back? Man, I can't lean on that. Man, he must have done something. He's getting what he had coming to him. He shouldn't have done this or he shouldn't have done that. And that's what's going around. They're saying he must be a murderer. Look, his God let him escape the sea, but he's going to get him now. But again, all these people are watching. Paul has a captive audience. And the beautiful thing about it is he doesn't get sick. He doesn't well up and die. He casts it off into the fire and walks off fine. But now all these people start to think he's a god. And it doesn't really say much more after that. But based on what I know about Paul, I'm going to assume he tried to set the record straight really quickly. You'll have to interpret that for yourselves. But through all of this, now he has a captive audience. Well, the chief official of the island, Publius, invites him to his house. They spend about 3 days with him. He feeds them. He takes care of them. But like we read at the end, will you pull up 8 and 9 one more time, please? 28, 8 and 9. But see, now we get to the end of the story, and this is the part that we already knew. He winds up at Publius' house, and his father's ill. Now, Paul went in and prayed for him and laid his hands on him. If you've got your Bible out, underline hands. Those same hands that just a few verses ago had a deadly viper hanging from them. Those are the hands that he laid on him. I don't want you to miss the significance of that, because if that viper hadn't have bit him, he may not have ended up there. I mean, we don't know. But I would imagine if all the people on the island were going on and on about this guy that washes up, gets bit by a viper, doesn't get sick, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's probably how the chief official winds up with him to begin with. So he lays his hands on him. The next verse, please. And then all the other sick people on the island came and were healed. Again, not 2 of them, not 10 of them. I don't know how many people were on the island, but I underlined all the other sick people. See, Paul went through his trials. He went through his tribulations. But God already knew the end. See, we started that way. We knew where this was going. When we're going through those things in our life, we can't see. We've all heard the beautiful little cliche coffee cup saying, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. That's true. And Paul knew what was coming out. Now, Paul did have visions. God and the angels, they spoke to him. But he had faith. Well, I'm going to go before Caesar, so I'll just kind of ride the ride and do what I can along the way. It had to happen. If Paul hadn't have been arrested, then he wouldn't have been on the ship. Those 276 people wouldn't have had faith. They may not have been saved. The crewmen might have lowered the life raft and they might have died. They may not have washed up on the island. The people on the island may not have been healed. And it's all because of the trial. Sometimes what you're going through, it might not have anything in the world to do with you. It might have something to do with the people that are gathered around you that are watching you go through it. Can you remain faithful? Can you break bread in front of those people and give thanks to God when you're at the bottom? It's easy to be a Christian when you're on top. When God's raining down blessings and you get a raise at work and everything's going right, it's really easy to thank God. But when your ship is sinking and you're watching pieces of it float away, can you break bread and give thanks then? Can you have faith that God knows what He's doing then? So again, God already knew the end of the story. It makes perfect sense to Him. Well, will you pull up John 11, 14 and 15? So I'm gonna back up. We all know the story of Lazarus, right? Lazarus dies, Jesus raises him. We've all read that since we were knee high to a grasshopper in Sunday school. But in my studying, I come across something really interesting. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. But verse 15, and now for your sakes, I'm glad. And I don't think this ever hit me like it did in preparing this message. I'm glad. Now, I imagine all these people gathered around weeping. They've lost Lazarus. Jesus says, I'm glad. I don't know what I would say when you hear your master and Savior tell you, I'm glad. I'm glad I wasn't there. For now, you will really believe. Come and let's go see him. It had to happen. Lazarus had to die. Because in his death, they saw God's glory. In his death, we read about God's glory today. 2,000 some odd years later, I'm not going to do the math, we're still talking about it right now. It had to happen. I don't know what trials, I don't know what storms you're going through, but I believe they have to happen. So in wrapping up, I have a little testimony of my own and seeing storms and seeing things. And Pop, I apologize. I didn't tell you because you wouldn't have came. My dad had lymphoma. He was diagnosed. It was pretty bad. Part of the way through the treatments of his lymphoma, they found out he had colon cancer. So they had to stop the treatments on the lymphoma, and they had to take care of the colon cancer. So the whole time the lymphoma is still an issue. It's still aggressive. It's still acting up. He has surgery. He beats the colon cancer. And it was a 1 in a million shot that they found the colon cancer to begin with. But so now Dad's going through chemo for what seems years upon years. It was one after the other. You want to talk about waves smashing against your ship and not seeing stars? He couldn't catch a break. There was man, it was that moment. All hope was lost. And they told him that he wouldn't walk again. That the chemo had done damage to his legs, the neuropathy, that he wouldn't be able to walk. And of course, me and my siblings, we're horrible human beings. And so, we start sending him commercials of, y'all, the ones of you that are old enough, you remember Ethel and whatever the names was at the Grand Canyon on the scooter. Now I'm free to see the world. Yeah, we would call my dad and we would say stuff like that because we're horrible. But to be honest now, before everybody judges me, it's how my family grieves. But not to make light of it, my dad is told he's not going to walk. Well, Dad didn't hear it. Dad ain't listening to it. Dad told me he'd crawl. Like he's not. That's just not my dad. If none of you have had the pleasure of knowing him, he's sitting right there. Everybody, wave everybody. Look. But then things got serious. See, I always brushed it off at first because I thought, well, it's Dad. I mean, it's cancer, but I mean, he's Dad. He'll be okay. It's not gonna. And then it got bad. And then the doctors told him he had 6 months left to live. I remember me and him were riding in the truck. We're listening to music, and he's telling me what he wants to happen at his funeral. I'm helping him pick out songs for his funeral. He tells us all goodbye. We've made peace with it. We're at that moment. And I'm sorry. Will you click that picture? I know you're about to kill me. He got mad at me when we took this picture. We took Haley to see him. He didn't want us to take it. And I told Crystal to take it because I was afraid I might not get another one. I remember going home. Crystal was at work. Haley had laid down for a nap. And I remember getting on my knees at our couch and started off giving God what for. I hit my knees and my couch was soaked with tears. God, you promised me that you would take care of things. You promised me that you would be with us. Jesus stood out and said, "Peace, be still." And he stopped the ocean storms. And you're letting my dad suffer like this. And it's not right. And I went from screaming to crying. I went through all 5 stages of grief within one prayer. And I was shouting. I probably woke Haley up from her nap because I didn't see the end of the story. See, I was holding God accountable for what I saw in front of me. And I had, at the end of my prayer, I had this peace. I backed up and maybe apologized for some of the things I'd said a few minutes prior. But I had this peace. And looking back, I didn't see it then. Looking back, I see it now. Those of you with kids, I want you to imagine when your kid gets really upset and you're comforting them and you're hugging them and you're holding them, but you're kind of smiling because you know everything's okay. You know how it's going to turn out. And looking back, I feel like God held me at that moment, but I know he had a smile on his face because in his glory, he basically said, "Now let me show you something." I am so sorry, Dad. But I need you to stand up. I'll take you out to eat after this. Come here. I love you, Pop.
I would kill you.
I know. Did anybody count how many steps that was? Like 6. Okay, look at there. We got. there's 6 or 7 miracles that we all got to see.
You can take down the picture.
I'll take you out to eat, I promise. Okay. He wouldn't walk. He walked fine. But you take a great big deep breath. They said he wouldn't breathe. He's breathing fine. He's on less medications than I am. God knew the end of the story. And Dad, I don't know why you had cancer, and I know it was rough, but I know what it did for me. I know how it was used. And you remained faithful through all of it. And you told me time and time again, God's got it. You know, you were just kind of waiting it out and letting him have his will. And as I was preparing for this message, Haley and Hattie knew that this was coming. And believe it or not, they did not tell. But you were coming over that Wednesday. And so we're sitting at breakfast and we're eating. We're getting ready for you to come over. And I got to explain to them that they get to see a miracle every time they spend time with you. Haley remembers some of you being sick. And Haley knows that every time she hugs her pawpaw's neck, it's a miracle. But God knew the end of the story. I'm so sorry. So God knew the end of the story. God knew what he was going to do. I was just oblivious to it. But he has used that moment. That was a defining moment in my Christianity. Because faith is believing, not seeing. We've all heard the little line at the end of the Santa Claus movie with Tim Allen. But I'm hard-headed. So God, in all of his mercy and grace, decided just to go ahead and show me and give me proof. So as the band comes up, I would ask you, if you're going through something, if you're struggling with something, if you've been through something and you just want to give thanks, if God's already seen you through that storm, if you have one on the horizon, this altar is a perfect place to ask him for his mercy, to ask him for his help. There's nothing wrong with asking him why you're in the storm. But he's the only one that can tell you. He's the only one that can answer those questions. And I don't know what his answer will be, and I don't know if you'll like his answer. But it is the right answer. It's the only answer. So